I lost some serious money when I first started investing in real estate, and you will too if you don't know what you're doing. Look, I don't want you to make the same mistakes that led me to lose $50,000 on one of my first deals. That's why in this video, I've put together 5 rules that'll help you get started no matter where you are in your real estate investing journey. If you're new to this channel, hi, I'm Dr. Jeff Anzalone, Louisiana periodontist that wants you to know how to get out of the rat race by building passive income streams. You can download my quick start passive income guide with the link below this video. Let's get started. Rule number 1 is get educated. Without knowledge, you're doomed to follow other people's advice without knowing whether it's good or bad. Let's take real estate investing. If you're not smart with it, it can be like a loaded gun. And with a loaded gun, you can either protect yourself or you can kill yourself with it. Now, early on, I didn't have the adequate knowledge, which is really why I lost my shirt in that first deal. But if you want to start investing, you've got to be smart with it, especially when you're using the 4-letter word called debt. Now, the wealthy know how to use debt to their advantage because they've educated themselves to be smart with it. And if you don't know what you're doing with it, well, there's story after story about people that have been completely wiped out because of debt. So that's why you need financial education. Because if you're taught always to get out of debt, get out of debt, get out of debt, well, that's not really 100% accurate. If you don't have the financial education, when somebody says that your house is an asset, or hey, maybe you should invest in this stock because you know what, it'll never go down, or you don't know the difference between a good or bad investment because look, you know what, some real estate investments can go bad. And if you don't know good investment advice from bad investment advice, then at some point in your life, unfortunately, you're going to get taken advantage of, just like I was. Here's the bottom line. You can invest in gold and lose money. You can invest in real estate and lose money. You can invest in crypto and lose money. You can invest in stocks and lose money. But you can also make a lot of money in just about every one of those things. So make sure that you're laser focused on growing your financial intelligence. You can do that by either finding a mentor, reading books, watching YouTube videos like this one, and then you'll have a better idea on how to tell the difference between good advice versus bad advice, which leads us to rule number 2, set investment goals. Now, a goal is different than a wish because you may wish to become rich, but that doesn't mean you've ever taken steps before to make your wish come true. Now, most of our new Passive Investor Circle members that join our group, they typically haven't set clear and specific investment goals. Now, once I spend, I'd say the first 10 to 15 minutes with them on the phone, helping them with this, then that becomes actually their new roadmap and action plan in order to achieve FI or financial independence. You're far more likely to achieve FI by writing down specific detailed goals than not by doing any of that at all. Some examples could include maybe the number of properties that you want to invest in each year, maybe the different types of properties that you want to invest in each year, and the amount of cash flow that you want to obtain maybe each month or each year, each quarter, whatever. But getting as specific as possible with this is really going to help you, again, stay laser focused on your achieving your goals with real estate investing. And which leads us to rule number 3, learn how to read financial statements. Now, one of the main lessons that Robert Kiyosaki teaches in his book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, is that the rich buy assets and the poor and middle class acquire liabilities that they think are assets. His reason starts with knowing the 6 words that are the basics of financial intelligence, and that are income, expense, asset, liability, and cash flow. So I've put a diagram up here to 2 different diagrams to show you what this looks like with somebody in the middle class versus what this looks like with somebody that's wealthy. So these are going to be the different cash flow patterns of these two. So when you look at the average person, they have a job, right? They're trading time for money. So their money comes in in the form of income, right? And then, this could either be, going into their bank account or whatever. So it comes in, and then it's going to pay for, let's say, their house or their car or something like that. So it's actually going to come in, pay for a liability. All right. And Kiyosaki is really big on teaching that a house, even though everybody says that the house is an asset, he teaches that a house is not an asset, but it's actually a liability. Because why? Because cash is flowing out. So liability, expense, and cash flows this way. Because you've got to pay for your taxes, you've got to pay for your upkeep, you've got to pay for your insurance, maintenance, all of this stuff. So this is the typical cash flow pattern of the middle class or poor person. They make their money, comes in income, it pays for the liability, it could pay for a car, and then all of that money from the liability flows into expenses. So for a car, same thing. It would be upkeep. It would be car notes. It would be oil changes, car tire rotations, tires, all that kind of stuff. All right. So now let's take a look, and we'll shift gears down here, and we'll take a look. And it's very easy what the cash flow pattern of a wealthy person is. What do we talk about over here? The rich buy assets. So down here, they could have real estate. They can have stocks. They can have crypto. They can have all these different types of assets. And guess what these assets produce? That's right, they produce income. So you got the assets that are producing income. Looks a little bit different than that one. Up here, they're trading their time for money, buying a liability, expense, it goes out. So it's just a cycle. They have to keep working, they have to keep trading time for money. Down here, they get their assets to income, and it's just a cycle again. But again, down here, they're not trading their time for money. And regarding debt, we talked about debt a little bit earlier. Kiyosaki's big lesson is it really doesn't matter what type of asset that you have that's debt's on, because it could be a car, it could be a house. So let's say that you have a car and you've got debt on your car. Well, everybody says, well, a car is always a liability. Well, what if you're using your car as an Uber or Lyft driver? What would that be? It'd be an asset, right? Because that you're actually getting income off of it. If you've purchased a house and somebody's renting it. So basically what you do is you look at where the cash is ultimately flowing from the asset or liability or whatever that you purchase. So again, if it's a car and all the money is flowing out because you're the one driving the car, well, then it's a liability. But if it's a car and the money is flowing back to you in the form of Uber driver payments, and it's paying for all of the expenses, well, then it's considered an asset. So basically, if it's putting money in your pocket, it's an asset. If it's taking money out of your pocket, it is a liability. So again, that's why it's so important to become educated. It's important to learn how to read these financial statements. And the bottom line is know the difference between what's an asset and what's a liability, which leads us to rule number 4, and that is to learn everything that you can about taxes. Now, before you get upset thinking that you need to go back to school to be an accountant, uh, this isn't what I'm talking about. With anything regarding finances, again, having a basic understanding of it, then surrounding yourself with those that are much smarter than you is going to take you much farther in life with success, with building wealth, than trying to do it all by yourself. And with regarding taxes, it's no different. Real estate is the number one reason why the wealthy legally pay little to no tax at all, because the IRS gives both the business owners and real estate investors really an unfair advantage over employees, because most of the time the employees don't really know what to do. One of the rare gifts that the IRS actually offers us is something called depreciation, which we've spoken about before in a previous video. And for those that have not watched that, or you're not really sure what that is, it's basically a tax strategy that allows you to write off the value of an asset over time. Now, whenever you buy things, over time, they start to lose their value. such as like this computer that I'm on now, cell phone, that sort of thing. But as most things that we buy lose their value, again, with the passage of time, the IRS actually allows us to take a tax deduction for that declining value, which they call depreciation. What's great about real estate is that even though it typically appreciates or goes up in value over time, the IRS actually still allows us to claim depreciation, even though it's going up in value. Now, this can be done for a few ways. Something called straight line depreciation, where they'll actually allow us to depreciate it out over evenly over 27.5 years. Or you could order what's called a cost segregation study, that an engineer will come in, look at your property. They will segregate out the cost, and they will allow you to uh, accelerate that depreciation. Instead of 27.5 years, it could be anywhere from 5, 7, or 15 years, by identifying all the non-structural elements of the property along with any land improvements. Even better is something called bonus depreciation, which is actually a form of accelerated depreciation that's going to allow you to take the benefit of all that depreciation in year number one instead of over 5, 7, 15, or 27.5 years. So now you understand why it's so important to learn about how this works, how the financial statements work, how taxes works when it comes to getting into real estate. Which leads us to the fifth and final rule, my rule that I invest with personally. I always invest for cash flow. Now, as a father of two teenagers, I want my money to work hard so I can spend time with my kids before they move out of the house. But on the other hand, I also don't want to risk the money that I've worked very hard for in this dental practice. I don't want to put a lot of risk on it. It's for this reason I typically invest in something called real estate syndications. And the ones that I invest in are the ones that are actually cash flowing as soon as I get into them. They're cash flowing from day one. Typically, these are going to be what's called a Class B. Class A would be new construction, new development, luxury, super nice. Class B would be older, still nice to live in, but an older, a little bit older apartment with what's called a value add strategy. This means that once the property is acquired, you can turn around and start renovating them. You can start updating the floor, countertops, painting, cabinets, lighting fixtures, that sort of thing. And once you start doing these renovation, you in turn, you're adding value to the property. You're adding value to the asset. So because of these improvements, if you're living in an apartment, it's kind of older, and then the owner comes in and updates it, well, then what can they do with the rent? Right. They can increase the rent, increase the monthly rent all across the board. And because of that, they're able to increase the net operating income. And whenever a group goes out and they purchase an apartment, unlike when you purchase a home, so if you were to purchase a home, let's say it's $300,000. Well, you want to look at the comps or what's comparable in the neighborhood. So if the asking price, let's say, is $300,000 for the home, the one next door is 350, the one across the street 375, the one down the road's 500. Well, then it's fairly comparable to the others. Well, you don't do that when it comes to apartment buildings. It's based on the net operating income. How much income can that asset produce? It doesn't matter if the one next door lists for $5 million or the one across the street lists for 10 million. It's based on how much money can come out of that apartment building. And because you're able to increase the rental income, it causes it to increase the net operating income, which in turn, whenever it sells, it will be able to sell for more. So typically, these properties that I invest in, they're held for around 5 years, and then they're sold for a profit. Now, during this whole period, investors are able to collect passive income from the excess cash flow of the property for the ones that I'm in every quarter. And once the property sells, what I do is I take all of the money, which includes the initial investment that I put in. Typically, these are anywhere from $75,000 to $100,000 minimum. So let's just say it's $100,000. So you let's just write this out. So let's say we invest $100,000 in one of these Class B value add, and it's a 5-year hold, and let's say it pays 7%. All right, so 7% of $100,000 each year, that's going to be $7,000 a year for 5 years. So 7,000 times 5 years, that would be $35,000. That would be that $7,000 that you get per year times 5 years, $35,000. So after this sells, you get the initial investment back, your $100,000, plus you get the 35K. Now, typically you don't start getting your first distribution until 6 months after the closing. So you put your money in, then there's like a 2 to 3 week deadline to fund your deal. Then after that, the syndicator, general partner, typically tries to close on the property, within like 45 to 60 days. After that, then you'll start getting your first distribution. And in this case, it would be $7,000 divided by four. It's, four even distributions. So then I take the initial investment, plus I'm taking my distributions, plus I'm taking the profit. So most of these that I invest in, they aim to have a 2x equity multiple, which means inevitably the $100,000 in 5 years would turn into $200,000. So in this case, they're projecting the profit split to be about 65 grand. So if you take the 65 grand, you add it to the 35 grand in distributions, plus the original $100,000, that's where we get the $200,000. That makes sense? So then once this sells, what I do is I just take all of this money, I just keep it in a separate checking account, earmarked real estate. I take this money and I just roll it into another deal. Well, here's the cool thing, that if you keep doing this year after year after year, well, guess what? This really starts to compound and grow after about year 5 or 6. So if you want to learn more about this process, about how I invest, then what you can do is head over here to check out this video where I'm going to discuss with you my wealth building strategy to increase your cash flow. I'll see you over here.